I think that in the same way that we've seen something like walk score grow in its importance because of how it serves as a helpful proxy, people are increasingly interested as well in understanding a little bit of the flavor of the neighborhood that they're moving into.
Welcome to the None Size Fits All podcast. My name is Jon Boller, co-founder of Grid Consulting. I have an awesome guest today, Boller and Clise, the CEO and founder of Intentionalist. Welcome to
Good morning.
How are you doing?
Thanks so much. I'm great.
Tell us about what you're doing. What is the Intentionalist?
So I think it's easy to try to dive right into the nuts and bolts and to talk about the platform, but ultimately, Intentionalist began as an idea that we as consumers can make a difference through the money that we spend in our daily lives.
Sure. So what's your background? Let's talk about the idea then. Where did the idea originate from? What were you doing prior to starting the company?
So I've spent the majority of my career in corporate America, leading corporate social responsibility and sustainability. And what that means is that I've been hanging out at the intersection of business and society and working with corporations to better understand risks and opportunities associated with environmental, social, and economic impact. I mean, it's really helping people to understand that we can operate as a business and maybe even improve our business-related outcomes by putting on kind of the trifocal lens that asks, how does my business impact the planet? How does my business improve people's lives? And that we don't need to trade off social and environmental impact in order to grow. And so nowadays, what we see increasingly are companies that are looking at opportunities, to double growth while having their environmental footprint. It's rooted in the recognition that we live on a planet with finite resources, that at our corporations we're employing people who come from a variety of different backgrounds and interests, people who care about the community that they live and work in, and would love for the company that they're a part of to be part of the solution when it comes to our cities, our country, and the world.
So it's super noble. You're at corporate America, you're in this kind of intersection. How long was the idea sitting there? And I guess at what point did you finally say, okay, enough is enough, I'm going to go do it?
So I would say that the idea for Intentionalist marinated for the better part of 5 years. So if you go now 6 years back, a friend of mine from business school was getting married in Thailand, and I thought, I'm excited to see Derica, but I'm also excited to travel and see northern Thailand.
Sure.
At the same time, I was in a role leading a sustainable development function for a corporation. I'm thinking about responsibility, ethical growth, and what went through my mind was, I would love for my experience as a tourist and for the money that I spend to go toward benefiting people.
Sure.
And as a result of that, the kinds of activities that I sought and experiences where I looked to buy gifts, meals, was informed by the desire to spend money in support of local people and the local community.
Sure.
That was wicked hard to try to figure out how to do.
Sure.
And so I came away from that experience thinking that there's a growing number of tourists interested in a more authentic, differentiated experience that at the same time can benefit local people in the places that we're visiting And yet there isn't an easy way
Mm-hmm.
for us to find and support those people, those local businesses and those organizations. And as I started to look at whether there were resources that might make it possible for me to find women-owned, veteran-owned, minority-owned local businesses in my city or other cities throughout the country, I found that it was an incredibly difficult undertaking.
Sure. I know that because when I travel, I always look for the authentic experience, and the only thing I can do is really go to Google or ask friends or family from like social media and say, does anyone have any recommendations?
Yeah.
So how did you so it's like Thailand plus corporate America, those two things blend into this new idea. How did you take that and move forward and actually then create your company?
So I think in many cases, a lot of times, kind of entrepreneurial seeds are planted through our own experience. Mm-hmm. And I had a really simple but really powerful experience, not this past year, but the year before. It was Black History Month. And my wife and I were thinking about opportunities to celebrate the contribution of African Americans in our community. Are we giving philanthropically? Are there opportunities to volunteer, celebrate arts and culture? But the reality is that we were both busy women in corporate America, and what do? We eat out a lot. And so we thought, okay, one thing that we can do is we can spend Black History Month eating out at Black-owned restaurants. And then hours of research. And the challenge is that you mentioned some of the tools that you use when you're trying to figure out where to go. One of the things that we also ran into is that those tools aren't oriented toward letting you know who is behind a business. It's all about how to get you what you want as fast and as cheaply as possible. And so we found that there was a real gap and knew that there had to be a better way. So ultimately, I think you could say that I eventually started Intentionalist in some ways because I ran out of excuses not to, but also because the opportunity to leverage consumer spending in support of a more inclusive economy and support of the kind of community that I think we all want to live and work in just continued to resurface in my daily life.
So I said Google and Facebook, and when you and I talked the first time, it was like Yelp was the thing we kind of talked about. I guess, how does Intentionalist differentiate itself from Yelp, and what are the things that Yelp is actually missing, and that's what you guys are feeling?
So coming back to the Black History Month example, if you Google best Black-owned restaurants in Seattle, one of the top entries is actually a Yelp entry. If you click on that, the results that it delivers, 2 of the top 3, the last time I did the search, actually aren't Black-owned restaurants. So I would say, for one, because of the way that their algorithm seems to work, it's driven by the content of reviews, which can be misleading. But I think that rather than opine on what I think the difference is, I would point toward what the small business owners that we've been getting to know have shared they think the difference is, which is that when they're engaging with Intentionalist, there is an element of trust that is otherwise missing from their day-to-day. Certainly there isn't a day that goes by that a small business owner isn't approached by someone trying to sell them something to help boost their revenue or cut their cost, or any number of things under the sun. But unfortunately, through the conversations that we've had with hundreds of small business owners, the trust deficit is real, and it's because the perception is that everybody is looking to make a buck off of the backs of small business owners, and even more so, when it comes to those for whom maybe English isn't their first language. And so I would say that the first way that we're different from just about any other resource out there is our emphasis on people and storytelling.
Sure.
So we understand that as a foodie, your top priority might be food. We would invite you to consider that you can have foodie quality food if that's your jam, while at the same time supporting a woman-owned or POC-owned business and learning a little bit about who the business owner is and their story, and in doing so, connecting with and contributing to your community.
So the story aspect is, I imagine, super amazing for you to hear these stories. What percentage of your time are you out in the community meeting with these small business owners, writing about the actual businesses and telling those stories? And I guess what are a few things that you've learned that have been really powerful for you?
So I think that it's shifted over time. Because I think the other thing that makes us a little bit different and maybe a little bit counterintuitive is that we wanted to take the time to get to know small business owners and what their pain points are before rushing to sell a solution. And so as a result, I would say the first 6 months that we existed, we spent almost all of our time talking to and getting to know, because you have to remember that we're also creating a data set that doesn't already exist, which introduces some of its own complexities. I mean, fortunately, what we're finding is that through partnership, we can be a lot more efficient than we were on day one when it comes to identifying and engaging with diverse local businesses.
What are a few stories? Do you have a couple that you can spit out that were impactful to you from meeting with these small business owners? Are there any that you'd like to share?
So one that comes to mind is a family-owned restaurant in Fremont. It's called Cafe Turco.
Okay, I'm familiar.
And in addition to having ridiculously good food, I mean, I've come to think of it as comfort food. It's so good. The flavors are on point.
Yeah.
It's so amazing food. Check. The reason that my mind goes to Cafe Turco is because one of the things that I think we sometimes lose track of in the busyness of our day-to-day are the ways that small businesses contribute to and shape our communities beyond the food that's on the plate or beyond the haircut that we're getting.
Yeah.
And in the case of Cafe Turco, as I got to know the woman in charge, what I have loved about getting to know Soraya is that in addition to being an incredibly talented cook and growing her business, she thinks an awful lot about her community and how her business enables her to give back. And one particular story that comes to mind is that she was talking about her reaction after the Trump administration announced their so-called Muslim ban. Her response to that action wasn't just to kind of hunker down and look after her own and look after her business, but rather was to take the opportunity to start volunteering at Christian churches so that people could see and experience her as a Muslim woman and not feel afraid.
Awesome. That's powerful. That's a hell of a story. Okay, so if I'm a consumer and I'm looking for a new place to go and I end up finding myself on your website, what is that experience going to be like? Is it going to be some type of I search for X, Y, and Z and then this is what I get, or am I going to get stories, or what's kind of the consumer experience when using your site?
Certainly, if you are in a particular neighborhood and you're looking for coffee, then you might be inclined to type in coffee.
Yeah.
And then you can filter by neighborhood. And what you would see is a listing of different intentionalist businesses that sell coffee.
Yep.
You'll see an image, you'll see a short description, and then what makes us different is that you'll also see an indication of whether the business is family owned or veteran owned or woman owned or LGBTQ owned.
Mm-hmm.
That gives you just a quick visual indication
Yep.
of the person or community represented by the business. Then if you click through, there's the opportunity to dive a little bit deeper.
Sure.
And so what we've tried to do is split the difference between something that is, one or two sentences, which we'll include at the outset, with something that's longer form and allows you to learn a little bit more about the person and story behind the business.
Okay.
So right now, if you were to go to our landing page and click on one of our featured businesses, at the top, you'd be able to see a brief description, who the owner is, a little bit about the business. But then if you scroll down a little, you have an opportunity in 3 or so paragraphs,
Okay.
just to get a little bit better sense of the who behind the what.
Sure. Is it entire, like, am I going to go in and we'll use Seattle as an example. If I type in Fremont, am I going to get all of the businesses, or is it opt in for you as a business owner? Like, how are you going out and getting people to be there, and how do you get the story for each of those people?
We started by literally and virtually pounding the pavement, so to speak.
Sure.
And just trying to figure out who are the people behind different businesses.
Sure.
So that you as a consumer at least have transparency, have a sense of who benefits from the money that you're spending. And then over time, in partnership with nonprofit organizations and chambers, but also based on recommendations and suggestions from the growing community of users. So I would say it started with businesses that we identified, but is growing through the collective input of nonprofit community-based organizations and people like you and me who have a favorite falafel spot.
Sure.
And would love to share that with other people.
Got it. We work a lot in real estate, and real estate agents obviously work often a handful of communities within their city. I guess, what have you seen from like the real estate community, and how could, if I'm a real estate professional, how could I use your site to help me with my business?
So rather than try to speak for real estate agents, I guess I would point to a couple of recent examples of conversations that I've had with folks who are working in real estate. Like so many other things, it's informed by a shift in consumer or client expectations with regard to what it is that resonates. And I think that in the same way that we've seen something like Walk Score grow in its importance because of how it serves as a helpful proxy, people are increasingly interested as well in understanding a little bit of the flavor of the neighborhood that they're moving into. And am I moving into a neighborhood that's just kind of big box stores or just chain establishments? Because we know intuitively that independent local businesses shape the character of a neighborhood.
Totally.
And so what I've been hearing from the people that I know in real estate is, number one, it's helpful to have a sense of who the different independent local businesses are in a neighborhood, because it's increasingly something that's going to come up. Is this a neighborhood where there's only chain coffee available, or are there other options? In addition to that, the opportunity to then translate that knowledge of local business into the client experience when they walk in the door for an open house.
Sure.
And so I've definitely been to open houses where the agent has taken the time to be intentional about whether it's the coffee they're serving, the pastries they're offering, so that it's an extension of the neighborhood and the culture of the neighborhood in a way that helps the prospective client feel more at home and feel more connected. The other thing that I've seen that I think is interesting I mean, again, as in any business, real estate agents are looking to differentiate their service, their brand,
Yep.
what they're about, and communicate that in a compelling, consistent way.
Mhm.
And one of the things that I've seen more of is focused on the way that agents think through and make intentional decisions around something like a closing gift.
Yeah.
And again, I think that that's another opportunity to look at whether something that is either aligned with the local community or as you've gotten to know your clients, are they vegan?
Yeah.
Or are they really passionate about fair trade? Or are they really involved with supporting immigrants and refugees? I think that so much about a lot of the work that we do is relational.
Yep.
And as you get to know a person and what's important to them, I think that bringing that knowledge into the decisions that you make about how you celebrate with them is something that can be really powerful.
In real estate, you often there's a lot of these Facebook groups and they talk about like what closing gift should I do, and you'll see things like a cutting board or like a mat. Like there's just all these gifts that are kind of one size fits all, and we're on the none size fits all podcast. So if I were doing closing gifts, how could I leverage your site in order to create a more customized gift that impacts the community in a greater way?
So I think that there are a couple of ways to slice and dice it.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly there's an opportunity to think about something that is local to the neighborhood, because when you're buying a home, sometimes you're moving to a new neighborhood, or perhaps even if you're staying within your neighborhood, you're not just picking, the physical box where you're residing. It's more than that.
Totally.
And so something that I think speaks to the culture and the relevance and resonance of the neighborhood, and whether that's where somebody eats, or if somebody's really into fitness, or if somebody's really into art. I mean, I think that there's a whole variety of different ways to think intentionally about something that is locally meaningful.
Mm-hmm.
I think another way to think about it is, again, coming back to if somebody is really passionate about whether it's immigrant rights or whether it's organic farming or whatever that dimension might be.
Sure.
Or maybe they're somebody who participated in one of the women's marches and you have line of sight to that. I think that a gift with a story is more powerful than something that I
got for everybody.
give you that doesn't have any sort of deeper meaning or
So
thought.
I totally agree. This is a different pivot, but like the world we live in, you hear all these companies that are like, I'm going to be the Uber of X, and you hear about the shift to the on-demand economy and the service, and a lot of that's because we as people expect speed. But what's also happening is there's like this shift going back the other way, which is the like people talking about everyone does everything on their phone and they text and they don't talk, and your company is like totally going in that direction where the story and the feelings matter more than the speed, if you will, or this like the intimate story of how that food was prepared versus the assembly line that is in every city that I go to. I guess, what are your thoughts on that? Like the millennials were like, on demand is everything, but not really.
Yeah.
I don't always like on demand. So what are your thoughts?
I mean, I think that you're speaking to the opportunity right there.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that we as people have a tendency to want to paint things as all this way or that, as black or white.
Yep.
And I think that the reality is that while our consumer culture, in many instances enabled by technology, is playing to the desire that we have for convenience, convenience isn't the only thing that we care about all of the time. Now, don't get me wrong. There are times when I'm in a hurry. If Starbucks is there, I'm going in. I'll get my Java chip frappuccino or my
Java chip frappuccino.
My wife makes it. I know. I'm a child. Okay, so Java chip
I've never heard of
frappuccino.
Java chip frappuccino.
I mean, it isn't even a coffee beverage, right? It's like candy you stuck through a straw. I mean, so now that I brought up Starbucks, there's another point that I just want to insert into the conversation, which is that Intentionalist isn't about being anti-corporate.
Sure.
And it isn't about encouraging an anti-corporate ethos, but it's more around reminding people that when you think of all of the different ways that you spend your money, that you can choose to make a difference through some of those decisions that affect outcomes that matter to you. And what that means is that there are times when I'm in a big rush and when I need something now and Starbucks is there, or I lost my charger cable and thank goodness Amazon can get it to me tomorrow. I think that there's absolutely a place for convenience, and I just wouldn't dispute that. But I think at the same time, where there's a gap is around solutions that speak to these other priorities that we have, and that speak to things that increasingly are a little bit more scarce in our lives when it comes to impact and connections. And what's interesting is that the same millennial or Gen Z shopper that wants it right now, cheap. If you have a conversation with them and ask them what they care about, how are they giving back to their community? What do they think about climate change? I mean, there are so many documented studies that the millennial and Gen Z generations care a lot about whether it's corporate responsibility, whether it's how our communities are growing and shifting and changing, whether it's around issues of inclusion. And so I think that it isn't just that the only way forward is faster and cheaper, but that there are occasions where we can make it easier for people to also fulfill their desire to make a difference and to give back, and to help people see that when it comes to making a difference and giving back, that yes, there's philanthropy, yes, there's volunteerism, but there's also an opportunity just to spend your money like it matters.
Sure. From the world I was in before, it was all like we were going completely on-demand economy. Everything is speed, efficiency, all that. And then there's the community where people want to experience more of these stories. It almost is like there's, this is me hoping out loud that we'll find this kind of middle ground at some point, because we've went so far one way with technology, and I think this is more how it originally was about stories, because you didn't have the mobile device that was enabling it. I guess, do you think that we are in trouble because we're going so far on the kind of on-demand side, or do you think we're going to be able to kind of move back towards this story and middle ground space?
I think that it depends on what we do to dismantle some of the barriers that prevent us from taking the time to connect and from making decisions that speak to and align with a priority other than convenience.
Sure.
And I mean, coming back to the example that I gave earlier around wanting to support Black-owned restaurants during Black History Month, it shouldn't be hard to do that. And for my wife and I to spend a month only dining out at Black-owned restaurants took hours and hours of research that isn't realistic to expect the average consumer to have the time to do. And so what we're trying to do as a result is make it easier for people to do something that they already want to do. Can I get a delicious meal and support my community and mitigate gentrification? Absolutely.
All right, so let's talk about a topic that is really timely in Seattle. Traffic and these big cranes everywhere downtown, and
the city has been growing.
It's growing like crazy, and I think most cranes anywhere in the country are in downtown Seattle. Like, is that a function of tech and the technology workers, or like I guess in your mind, not who's at fault, but why are we experiencing so much discussion around these things?
Well, I think that if you look at the numbers, and you started to reference this, Seattle has been growing and changing a lot. And in some ways, I think that has been a really exciting thing for the city. I think at the same time, with change, there are often consequences. And the way that has been playing out in terms of impacts, whether on traffic or housing or just the growth in real estate prices more broadly,
Yep.
has impacted and continues to impact communities throughout the city. And I think that as a result of that change, as a result of displacement, as a result of some of what people perceive as the consequences of really rapid growth, the hardship invites frustration, it invites fear, it invites anxiety, and it also, I think, invites questions around what the cause is or who is to blame. And I think that because the nature of our growth has been driven by tech, the conversation naturally turns to tech.
Yep.
And what has been the impact or the impacts of rapid growth, especially among the tech sector in our city. And one of the things that's been really visible is that with all of the growth and development, we've seen displacement, we've seen a rise in the cost of living, and that impacts real people.
Yep.
And so consequently, I think that there is a little bit of a resentful culture that has developed because there's a perceived gap between all of the benefit from that growth going to tech companies and the tech workforce without line of sight to what's being done to ensure that other people and other communities still have a place in Seattle.
Sure. So your background in corporate responsibility, like what can tech do? What can tech do to help here?
So one of the things that comes immediately to mind, so there's the relatively new initiative that was announced, Seattle.City, that is focused on how to engage more of the tech workforce civically, but also philanthropically. And I think that that's awesome because I think that people in a community are always going to be a little bit resentful of folks who aren't perceived of as participating as community members, folks who are perceived as, holing up in their office and, ordering on demand and not engaging as members of the community. And where I hope Intentionalist can be part of the solution is in encouraging tech companies, but other organizations as well, to think about and embrace the opportunity to mobilize their workforce, their members, in getting to know and support the diverse local businesses.
I mean, as you say that, like I'm thinking about what happens at a lot of big tech companies where they put up these big offices in a community and they start either they have their own food on site where it's like their own chefs, or they're catering. And obviously a lot of small business owners do the catering side of things, but not all have the ability to do at the scale needed for a big company. So I guess, how do you feel about that? Because it's like another move where tech is not engaging in the community. What about just giving
So that's a
$10?
super hot conversation for sure in San Francisco.
Okay.
No doubt. It's percolating here in Seattle as well, especially around having everything you could want and more on-site cafeterias and then some. That being said, I think that when it comes to what people in corporate social responsibility would term as social license to operate. There's room to think about, to the extent that you have an on-site cafeteria, people spend money outside of lunchtime. Mm-hmm. And so are there follow-on opportunities, after work or before work? And are there other ways that you as a corporation, that we as companies can encourage and maybe even incentivize our employees to spend time and spend money in the community where we have a presence? I think of a neighborhood like Fremont, mm-hmm. which is known for being a little bit artsy, a little bit quirky, a little bit weird in that really awesome Pacific Northwest Seattle way. Yeah. And I would imagine that part of the reason that companies are excited to have a presence there is because of that vibe and that culture. And yet, part of what makes that culture what it is are all of the independent small businesses. Sure. And so there really is an incentive in terms of thinking about your employees and the kind of place that they want to live and work, mm-hmm. to make it easier for them to find and support the independent small businesses.
I would love to have like a stipend that gets me to leave the office rather than keeps me in the office for the buffet style lunch that was brought in. I don't know. Awesome. So what is next for Intentionalist? What's the next 6 to 12 months look like for you?
So I think that, with your permission, I'll start with just what we have on the horizon in the next couple of months.
Yeah, of course.
Because we're pretty excited.
Sure.
So we're actually working toward our first pilot collaboration with a co-working space. Awesome. It's going to be over at the Impact Hub. Okay. And the Impact Hub approached us and said, hey, we've heard what you're about. We love that you're trying to make it easier for people to find and connect with local businesses, learn about the people behind them. We at the Impact Hub and our members care about being good neighbors and good members of our community, and we would love it if you would work with us on a solution that makes it easier for our members and our staff to get to know and support businesses in the local community. So what we've been working toward is a customized online platform that allows Impact Hub members to find, learn about, and then what we're going to do is organize a week-long campaign for intentional spending, where we kind of get out the vote, so to speak, and in the same way that you would mobilize employees around a week of volunteerism.
Awesome.
Similar spirit. We're going to measure how many different places Hub members go and visit. We're going to add up how much money they spend, learn from the experience, and then look at opportunities to bring that to other spaces and other companies.
Awesome.
The other thing that we're working on is an Intentionalist holiday gift guide.
Okay.
And if you think about the holiday season as a time when we are giving, when we are spending, our point of view is that you can find a great gift, take your team out to dinner, cater something on site, entertain relatives from out of town, and contribute to diverse local businesses. And so we're going to be debuting a guide that helps with that.
That's awesome. All right. Well, Laura, thank you for joining. This is really awesome.
No, thank you. And I do have something as we talk. So,
is it chocolate?
I love chocolate. And
as do I.
Over time, I've come to practice something that I refer to as chocolate diplomacy.
Chocolate diplomacy.
Chocolate diplomacy.
Okay.
So that if we aren't already friends, hopefully once we've broken chocolate together, our friendship will be rooted.
Yes.
So this is Intentional chocolate.
Okay.
It is made by a local company, Seattle Chocolates, woman-owned. And this particular chocolate is their social impact brand.
Okay.
It's called J Coco. And what I love about J Coco is that on the one hand, you can enjoy delicious chocolate. So we have dark chocolate with cacao nibs, we have dark chocolate with Middle Eastern spice, we have milk chocolate with sea salt toffee.
Okay.
But what J. Coco has done through their brand is married chocolate consumption with providing food for folks that need it.
Wow.
And so as I like to tell myself, I need to eat more chocolate so that I can do more good. And so I would invite you to determine, what tickles your fancy, and know that with every bite, you're supporting a local woman-owned company that through this product is working to give back and help those in need.
I love the spicy one.
All right.
We're breaking chocolate together.
There
Thank you
go.
so much. Middle Eastern spice, black peppercorn, cinnamon.
It's
Wow.
delicious.
Okay, is this your favorite?
Favorites are hard. I can appreciate a full range of chocolate.
Me as well. Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Thank
you.
Thanks for coming on the None Size Fits All podcast. Wishing you and your company nothing but the best, and keep running. This is awesome.
Thanks so much.
Thank
Be
you.
intentional.